address someone who's not here in reference to the use of discretionary funds. And what I mean by that is if we're going to make a decision on discretionary funds, we need to start looking at the least, the lost, and the left out. Our foster care population, and in reference to gun violence. It's quite a shame that you all were sent information from this brother that's been to the White House 5 times because of his expertise. 3 testimonies before a congressional hearing on it. And I'm just sending out a warning to Commissioner Keon Hardemon in reference to
not address any
Leroy Jones.
by name.
Yeah, I got a point of order, and that's my time. And it's a shame
your
on
time
all of
is
you.
gone. All right. Thank you so much. Sergeants.
Well, first of all, to the board members, many of us have day jobs. I was at my day job earlier today, and of course, I received the calls about what happened. For those of you who don't know, I practice law, and so many a times you'll find me in different courthouses before judges. And so one of the things that I do is I accept appointments for people who can't afford attorneys. So it's called a criminal wheel. And essentially what happens is when the public defender conflicts off of a case, it goes to a regional counsel's office, they conflict off, and then it goes to private counsel. And so and we all know that I used to practice as a public defender, so I'm practicing now, being able to give back to the community in that way. And in that experience, I actually have a great deal of experience dealing with people who've been accused of crimes and those who have been labeled criminals, right? Those people who are felons and et cetera. And, in doing that, what you've come to realize is that there are times in the criminal courtroom where things pull at your heartstrings. For instance, I'll give you an example. I have a guy who he was addicted to drugs and was arrested for drug possession, and he was arrested for possession with intent to sell. And he received a year of probation and a withhold of adjudication on one charge and adjudication on the other. Now, any other normal individual would have finished his probation and would have moved on with his life. But this particular kid, because he was addicted to drugs and in fact found himself homeless, he kept violating his probation. And so what ends up happening is that eventually, many people, you feel some way about this because you say, this kid has been sitting in jail now for a number of years because this probation violation has not been settled. So what's the complication? Well, the complication was that he was accused of murder as a probation violation. And so they weren't able to actually move forward with the case in chief, and so they dropped it. But here we are with a probation violation where he, in fact, is looking at more than 15 years of prison if, for instance, if the judge or the prosecutor decides that this is the amount of time they want to give him. And so I'm tasked with trying to negotiate what this time is going to look like, right? Fortunately, in this case, we've come to a resolution that I think that the client and also the state is both finding acceptable. But it brings me back to the first case, which is that this is a kid who had violated his probation because he had a drug possession and a drug addiction problem. And so had he not had that probation that kept open for that long of time, Commissioner McGee, you know that he would have been arrested for an attempted murder or a murder, and the case was dropped, he would have moved on with his life if they couldn't prove that murder. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about a kid who, in one circumstance, you find sympathy for because he has an issue with homelessness and drug possession that really he would have been let go? And he, in fact, was, because they gave him a year of probation. Hey, move on with your life. But then on the other hand, he was accused of murdering someone, and the state couldn't prove it. The state couldn't prove it. And so I say that to you because I'm used to looking into the eyes of people who have been accused of things, and they may or may not have done it. They may or may not ever give you the truth about whatever happened, but you're tasked with the responsibility of representing these individuals. And many of these people who may or may not have committed these crimes are affiliated with organizations. And sometimes organizations, they may call them gangs and things of that nature. And what is a gang, right? If you're someone who grew up in a place like I did in Liberty City, there are these, you have affiliations to certain streets that you belong to. And the question becomes, is that a gang, right? In my career, I have found it seldom that the state actually proves that someone is a part of a gang merely just by using that accusation. But I recognize gang activity. I know what it looks like to be threatened by somebody in the gang. I know what it feels like, right? I know I know how a gang acts in unison and what they do in order to not only show opposition that they mean business, but also show their brothers that they mean love, right? Because gangs, in fact, show love to each other as part of the way that they have camaraderie amongst each other. And so to me, earlier today, when I saw some of the activity that was going on in front of this dais, I recognized gang activity, especially from those people who were, in fact, convicted, and many have served time as felons in our community. So when I was, and you were Commissioner McGee in school, and people have been accused of wrongdoings in the past, but we spend our time trying to correct our future. But when I was in school, getting my education and becoming a lawyer and representing people who were accused of crimes, and I stood on the front side of the bar addressing the court like I was today. I'm doing that to defend the rights of every person that's been accused of crimes, and also the Constitution. But when I look at what happened today, what I'm seeing is an organization that uses our funding and the funding of other institutions like ours to do good in the community, supposedly. So anytime good is being done by an organization that doesn't make its own money and is done by, the money is in fact coming from you all, that's your accomplishment. And anytime that organization does poorly, utilizing the money that we've given them, that is our failure. And so we have to be accepting of both of those sides of the coin. But what I'm going to find not acceptable is our normalization of threats in this body. See, we normalize threats against black and brown bodies in this sort of institution as maybe they're joking. But let me ask you, if I were a white Jewish woman in a neighborhood that you were not familiar with, and someone said the things that certain individuals say to me, how would you find your response to be? If someone had come up to our mayor and said, Madam Mayor, and issued a threat to the mayor, if you don't react in a way that gives me more money, then these are things that we're going to carry out. How would you feel about that? In fact, I would go so far as to say that these organizations that we're paying for, they're like employees of ours because they are extensions of government. Imagine if a bus driver went up to the bus supervisor and said, if I don't get more money or this, advancement in my career or more hours, then, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. How would the government handle that? And so here we are with an organization that has individuals that are known and expressed it to you outwardly, right? Some of them say, hey, I've been shot a few times. My brother went to jail for murder. My other two brothers were killed. I'm in a wheelchair. So these are people who, in fact, have a history of this sort of experience. The peacemakers, you heard about peacemakers in the whole discussion. The peacemakers are employees that we pay to hold hands of people who've been accused of crimes or victims of things in criminal courtrooms. Many times their peacemakers are getting paid more than I'm getting paid as an attorney representing that same case. There's just facts. We do that, not these organizations. And so my point in all of this is to describe to you the frustration that I have when an organization that has been given so much opportunity to do good, so much of our resources, more than $100 million, and they've said that on the record before. An organization that started with individuals who were accused of robbery, right, extortion, and then giving plots of land, no development, and they are threatening us, especially the District 3 Commissioner, if we don't give them more. How should we handle that? What should we do? What should we do to organizations that take the time to threaten elected leaders in our community? What would you do if that threat was going towards any other person in our state? What if it was the governor? What if it was our president? I mean, but if we bring it back down, just what if it was our mayor? And so what happens is they hold the hand of the mayor and parade around in our community as if everything's all good. When in fact, it's not good, and they have threats upon the individuals who actually have the authority to make decisions within our community. And so I don't feel comfortable with this. I don't feel comfortable paying individuals who will continue to threaten me and my family. I don't feel comfortable with it. I don't feel comfortable, and I'm letting you all know that you should be on notice. As a matter of fact, what I would ask, this is what I would ask, because this happened so abruptly, I would request an immediate suspension of any payments being made to NANA and also to the Circle of Brotherhood for the actions that they have displayed, not only here today, but in the past, where in fact their executive director has said that he has people that can come see me. It's on the record. And so if and what I would like is for that immediate suspension to occur as of today. And then we can figure out what it is that we should be doing and how organizations should address us when they have needs in our community. But beyond finding ourselves in a predicament where you're going to force me to continue in business with individuals who threaten me for their way of living, I think is preposterous. And when I look at criminality, that is just precisely what it looks like. And so I won't be extorted on this dais. I won't be intimidated on this dais. The vast majority of people who live in our community know exactly where I live at, right? And so I am who I am and where I am. But one thing I will not do is cower to any thug in a polo shirt that claims that he loves black people in our community. And by doing good from time to time, will throw away and take advantage of opportunities to do bad for people who are giving back to this community. So that's my motion.
I second it. All right, Commissioner Hardemon, you are absolutely right, and that is why that behavior is not tolerated, and we made that clear. So you have an official motion, seconded by Commissioner Cabrera. To the attorneys, over here. This is appropriate. There's no repercussions. We could do this. I think we can, but
It's appropriate to make the motion. We would have to review the contracts to see what the consequences would be.
okay. The motion is a suspension, right, Commissioner Hardemon, until further review, or okay, of all funds to to two organizations, to the
Right. So it'll be Neighbors and Neighbors and Circle of Brotherhood. Both of those organizations receive funding through various entities and departments within Miami-Dade County. And so they are, in fact, one of the organizations that are, well, I'll just leave it at that. They have many different funding mechanisms. And so I want to make it very clear that no one from those any contract, any payment to anything that is dealing with any of their organizations, I want to come to an immediate cessation.
okay, and I agree. I just want to make one clarification, and you're saying this, but I want to make one clarification. This action is being taken because this body, specifically Commissioner Hardemon, but the entire body, received a threat, not because these organizations came and expressed their voice. So let's be clear. We have received threats by these organizations, not because they are exercising their right to express their voice and agree, whether we agree or disagree. That is why you are making this motion.
It is exactly why I'm making this motion. In fact, I mean, this organization has expressed itself a number of times over the years in my first in my first tenure, and I have yet to come out and say anything disparaging about them. And so we're going to find ourselves now to confront the truth in it. However, I think that it's most appropriate to start right where we are.
Okay. We have a motion. We have a second by Commissioner Cabrera. Commissioner from District 8, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Hardemon, for expressing what you did and for raising this issue. I think anytime we as elected officials receive threats of any kind, it should be taken very, very seriously. I think every one of the 13 commissioners has dealt with this in some way or another. All of us have families, and those threats always should be taken very seriously. It's another thing entirely to have a threat wielded on display directly in front of us at the podium, which is what we experienced here today. So the level of seriousness is appropriate, and the discussion that we're having now is a very important one, and I certainly condemn that behavior, as does, I'm sure, everyone else that sits on this dais. My question, however, is regarding the consequences of the motion that is on the table and before the body now, because I know these organizations employ people, and those people have families. And so if we are cutting funding to these organizations, they are not going to make payroll. They are not going to be able to pay their employees. I am wondering what the breadth of the motion is. I need to understand the financial implication and consequences of what has been laid on the table and is before the body. For example, one of these organizations is very active in the South. They run our mom and pop grant program. They run a small business incubator in my district. There are employees here. There are families here. There are our lives here. So I need to understand. So if someone from our attorney's office or if the maker of the motion knows that information, I need to know the breadth financially, i.e. what the dollar amount is that we are ceasing payments on, and the number of employees that would be affected by the motion should it pass.
Attorneys or administration, you're recognized. Well, there's
My
a
question is on the table. Can I have the question answered previously to any other commissioner interrupting? Thank you.
We would have to defer to the administration to compile for us the list of all of the outstanding contractual obligations with those two entities, and would have to review those to see what the consequences would be, to see if this is a permitted action based on the, any issues that have occurred between the county and those responsible entities. So as far as what contracts are outstanding and what the impact is, I would have to defer to the administration.
Okay. Question, though, to clarify the motion before we continue the debate is there a time frame on your suspension, and for an investigation to take place, for us to take further action as a body? What are you thinking as far as suspension?
Well,
Indefinitely?
as of right now, that's what it is. I mean, I'm not saying suspend them for a week or two. This is not a punishment for it. This is about whether or not we need to be doing business with these sorts of organizations. And in fact, see, this is what these organizations depend on. They depend on their ingratiating themselves with us and our business to the point where we are forced, as you put on the record earlier, Commissioner, you're forced to continue to it might have been you, but you're forced to continue business with them because they're so intertwined with what's happening. But organizations cannot act without impunity. And so when you have organizational leaders that make such decisions and they impact their employees. And so the question is, at what point is it enough? And so, yes, the reason why these organizations have employees is because we've given them money to get more employees. In fact, this such organization, for instance, in the Overtown area, had an incubator space. And in that incubator space, in their leadership, in the incubator space, they had employees that were underpaid, in my opinion. And so when they told the CRA executive director, you know what, we don't like your leadership, we don't want to be a part of your CRA anymore, for instance. The CRA then hired everyone who was there before and gave them increased pay because they also didn't have to pay the heavy administrative fees, right? And so I said that to you to say, in that circumstance, they dumped those employees like it was nothing. right? They had no cause or concern for those employees, and those employees right now are employees that work on the behalf of the Community Redevelopment Agency, providing this service to the community. And so I believe that there are going to be opportunities, and there are a number of organizations that can provide the services that we're looking for, such as service in a mom and pop grant. However, what we can't allow is someone who feels that they're too big enough to fail, that they're so big that they can threaten any one of you and force you all to do what they want you to do. Make no mistakes about this. That's what this is about. This is about trying to alienate one commissioner, threaten one commissioner to the point where he feels intimidated that he has to do what this is terrorism, if you will. That's what these sorts of actions are like. And so now all of you are thinking, well, should we do this? Because there are families involved. Yes, there are families involved. There are families involved on all sides, right? But all of us who take on a professional responsibility have to act within a certain degree of professionalism. And I don't care how many families are involved, but if someone comes up and they threaten my mayor, they are and should be terminated. So the fact that we were talking about suspension is good news to me, because it gives you an opportunity to at least make good on your face. But we cannot tolerate those sorts of actions upon anyone, not just on this board, but in our leadership, in any of these governmental positions where they have supervisory sort of capacity. You just cannot accept that sort of behavior.
All right, Commissioner Cohen-Higgins, you still have the floor. I asked a question. Do you
I
still?
just would like an answer to my question. The attorney said I yield to the administration. At that point, would it have been appropriate for the administration to have provided an answer? If the answer is I don't know, I'll accept that, but I do need some sort of an articulation on the record of what the actual implications are of the motion.
Madam Mayor?
Through the chair, as was stated by Commissioner Hardemon, there are a number of sources of funding that go to either of the two organizations mentioned. Some of them go through other entities. They pertain to, as you say, mom and pop grants, through CDBG funds. There's also grants that have to do with violence prevention and serving in the South, as you mentioned, as well as there's a grant through the Carrie Meek Foundation, which was from one-time ARPA funds. So those are the few that I'm aware of, but the exact details, the time frames, the amounts, I don't have at the top of my, I'm not currently able to provide all the details.
Commissioner Regalado, you're recognized.
Thank you. And I want to thank Commissioner Hardemon for his comments. It's only getting worse. Yeah, I know.
Let me talk for her. I'll talk for her.
I'm good. Thank you. I appreciate it, though. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks. The one thing that I would say is we do not pay these organizations on a monthly or bi-weekly. These are pass-through organizations. And as the mayor and Commissioner Hardemon mentioned, it's grant funding. So it usually comes in tranches. So I think there's always families involved. There's always people involved in any decision that this board makes, whether we reject an RFP or we approve something, right? There's always faces behind our decisions. But we are not directly employing these people. They are passed through. So I think the information that we need is what are the grant fundings and when are they released? Normally these things are released in 60 to 90 day increments. So I think to Commissioner Hardeman's point, he's asking for a suspension, more data, and an analysis of what exactly they're receiving from when, and a determination. So I don't think that a month or two should break anybody's back. And by the way, if it does, then that brings up another issue, right? Are we using organizations that are so underfinanced that they cannot withstand to survive without county funding for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, or 2 months? That's a bigger issue. And if that's the case, I would be very concerned also. So, and by the way, we did this to cultural affairs. I mean, we said, look, we don't have the money, we don't have the grants, you can figure it out, go find the money. So just to be clear, we've done this to a lot of people because we couldn't afford it. because we couldn't afford it, not because something happened. So I think that your request is a reasonable one, and obviously the administration needs time to find out what the funding is, what those grant release dates are, and then tell us how much has been given for what work for what time. It would normally impact what would happen in the next 3, 4, 5 months. It wouldn't impact what happens tomorrow.
All right, so I do have a question, and Bermudez, I'll go to you next. For my clarification, and I agree with everything you've said, and I would support this based on that. You mentioned two groups. I know there was like a group of people, of personnel. There was one specific, which I think it's the Circle of Brotherhood, that threatened you by name, which I stopped them immediately, and then went on to threaten the board, which I obviously condemned and said they would be escorted out of the chamber. But then the other group, which is the one that you guys are saying handles our Nana, the Leroy Jones guy, he and I got into it for another reason on another item, but he did not extend a threat or use any derogatory language or anything. Are they combined? Are they sister entities?
So their distinction is as different as the gray and black hairs upon your head.
They're very different, though. They just sit on my head.
They receive the exact same amount of moisture, and I don't know your mousse that you put on your head to keep it looking so nice, but the treatment is the
I'll
same.
share that with you off record. No, but in
No,
honesty,
these are inexplicably intertwined organizations. When you see one, you see the other. There is no distinction amongst them. There is no distinction amongst them.
Okay, I trust you. Just wanted to say that, though, that they're if they're two different entities, my brother and I are very different from each other. We were both birthed by my mother, same mom.
Right Twix, left Twix.
But my brother and I are very, very different from each other, night and day. I cannot be. My brother might be cool, but we're very different. I just want to point that out and perhaps consider bifurcating one of those. But Commissioner Bermudez,
First of all, maybe to answer part of that question is I do think they are intertwined, because I think if you look at the leadership, you'll see a cross-pollination. At least that's what's been shown to me. But, I agree with Commissioner Hardemon that there is a serious issue when an entity, whether it be defined as a nonprofit or not, is taking it upon themselves because they disagree with that commissioner's decision-making process to maybe give veiled or not so veiled threats. The mom and pop grants are important to all of us. Commissioner Higgins pointed out, I think in my district it's very important, in others. And I do know Mr. Jones from that, but as I understand, he's also part of the other organization. I may be mistaken, and Commissioner Hardemon can correct me. My question, though, is more to the lawyers or to the administration. And by the way, this is something we're going to probably have to look into, because when you have an entity that receives county dollars, are we actually, number one, seeing what they're actually doing with our dollars? Are they being effective? If they disagree with the position of a commissioner, whether it's a commissioner in a district where they do work or not, is there anything in writing in these agreements we're going to look into that there are ramifications for doing that from the legal side? And this may be something we have to look into moving forward also. But, I don't think any of us would want the type of comments that were referred to or inferred reference Commissioner Hardemon. And, I'm glad he was able to make it here and clarify it and state on the record exactly what the process is. I think everybody has a right to disagree, but they don't have a right to threaten. And I'm gonna be supportive of anything that has this. And I know mom and pop grants are very important. So the only thing I would tell the administration and the attorneys, we need to figure out, how that would impact the dispersal of those funds and those grants. And I think our county attorney already said she would need, or they would need to review the agreements. But, you know, I understand Commissioner Hardeman's point of view, and I think he is appropriately responding to something that really isn't proper. There was ways to disagree with him without having to use the language that was used. So at this point, once this gets cleared out, I'll be supportive of whichever way we want to go.
All right, Commissioner Regalado. Oh, Commissioner Hardeman, I think you want to clarify your
Well, the
direct.
county attorney's office is going to help me clarify some things as far as how the motion should sound on the record, if you will. But I also want to make it clear that there was no item that I had on that was either for or against these entities. There was no motion that I made. I was not present. You know, there was nothing on the floor about business that had anything to do with these two organizations, you know. And so there was no action that they were trying to thwart by even speaking today, because there was no action that was taken that was really deleterious to any of their positions. So, you know, to me, it came out of nowhere, and I took it for exactly what it was, a continuation of you know, these sorts of threats for me to do certain things, and this is unacceptable.
Commissioner Regalado.
Thank you. Just as a point of clarification, I know it's so painful. I just want to say that for District 7, we actually took the mom and pop grants in-house. We do them. So you don't have to use an entity to do the mom and pop grants. We decided to do it in-house. So this doesn't have to stop your mom and pop grants. We created a committee. Alejandro does a great job. So I just want to point that out. We're not stopping anybody from doing any programming.
All right, so we're going. Do you need to say something, Commissioner?
I just wanted to say that I'm going to be supporting Commissioner Hardeman. I don't think he's asking for anything that is unreasonable here, given the severity of the threat. I've had very pleasant interactions with Mr. Leroy, and you know, he's done a great job with the mom and pop grant in our district. But I did not see it from the angle of how Commissioner Hardman expressed it a couple of seconds ago. And, you know, I think he makes a good point that there was really nothing that we were going to discuss that had anything to do with those two entities. So that kind of gives me it puts me in a position where I want to know what's going on. You know, I've had, like I said, I've had very great interactions with Leroy in my district, but the way that certain threats were made, and the fact that there was nothing to talk about, having restricting any of these entities today, and the fact that you weren't even present, I kind of want to get to the bottom of this. So I'm going to be supporting this. I don't think that this is unreasonable, to at least halt for the moment. Maybe perhaps even launch some sort of investigation to get to the bottom of this, right? Because I want to know what's going on.
All right, Commissioner. We're going to take a brief pause on just the motion as the attorneys work with Commissioner Hardeman on it.